Man saves caged lion. What happens next will surprise you. The sun was setting over the dusty plains of Kenya, casting long shadows across the abandoned circus compound. David Martinez, a wildlife photographer from Spain, had been tracking illegal animal trafficking rings for months, but nothing had prepared him for what he discovered that evening. Hidden behind rusted trailers and forgotten equipment, he found a sight that would change his life forever. In a cramped metal cage, barely large enough for the magnificent creature it contained, sat a male lion. The animal's once golden mane was matted and dull, his ribs visible through his thinning coat. But it was his eyes that struck David most profoundly. They held a mixture of resignation and desperate hope that seemed almost human in their intensity. David approached slowly, his heart pounding. The lion didn't growl or retreat. Instead, he simply watched this stranger with curious, weary eyes. The nameplate on the cage read Simba, a cruelly ironic name for a king reduced to this pitiful state. According to the faded papers scattered nearby, the lion had been purchased from a failing circus 3 years ago, supposedly for a private zoo that never materialized. Since then, he had been forgotten, left to survive on scraps and rainwater. The photographer's hands trembled as he documented the scene. This wasn't just another story. This was a life hanging in the balance. As he knelt near the cage, the lion slowly approached the bars. Their eyes met, and David felt an inexplicable connection, as if the animal was pleading for help without words. "I see you, friend," David whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't leave you here." But David was just a photographer with limited resources. He had no legal authority, no connections to wildlife organizations in Kenya, and no idea how to navigate the complex world of animal rescue. The compound appeared to be private property, and removing the lion without permission would be theft, regardless of the humanitarian reasons. He felt utterly helpless, a feeling that intensified as he watched the proud animal pace the few steps his cage allowed. That night, David couldn't sleep in his modest hotel room. He researched frantically, calling every wildlife organization he could find, but the responses were discouraging. The legal process would take months if it worked at all. Meanwhile, the lion was deteriorating daily. David had seen enough abandoned animals to know that time was running out. The next morning, he returned to the compound with water and raw meat he'd purchased from a local butcher. The lion's reaction was heartbreaking. He devoured the food with desperate hunger, then looked up at David with what could only be described as gratitude. This daily routine continued for a week, with David documenting the lion's condition and trying desperately to find legal solutions. If you're moved by this story so far, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more incredible stories of animal rescue and human compassion. It was on the 8th day that everything changed. David was photographing the lion's improved condition. The regular meals had already begun to restore some of his strength when a convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the compound. David's heart sank, fearing he'd been caught trespassing. But what happened next was beyond anything he could have imagined. From the lead vehicle stepped a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed despite the dusty surroundings. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to command, flanked by what appeared to be security personnel and veterinarians carrying medical equipment. But it was her reaction to seeing the caged lion that revealed her true nature. "My God," she breathed, her composure cracking as she approached the cage. "How long has he been like this?" David stood slowly, unsure whether to flee or explain his presence. I've been coming here for a week. I found him in this condition. I've been trying to get help, but the bureaucracy moves slower than molasses, and meanwhile, this magnificent creature suffers," she finished, her voice carrying a slight accent David couldn't place. She extended her hand. "I'm Dr. Elena Volkov, and you are the photographer who's been documenting this situation." David nodded, confused. How did you? Word travels fast in conservation circles, especially when someone starts making calls about an abandoned lion. Your photos reached the right people. She turned to her team. Set up the mobile veterinary unit. I want a full health assessment immediately. As the veterinarians began their work, Dr. Volkov explained her presence to a stunned David. She was, he learned, one of the world's most successful wildlife conservationists, a former Russian oligarch's daughter who had inherited billions and dedicated her life to saving endangered species. Her foundation operated rescue facilities across 3 continents, and she had personally overseen the rehabilitation of over 1,000 large cats. The compound's owner owes my foundation a considerable debt, she explained matter-of-factly. He defaulted on a loan we provided for a legitimate conservation project that never materialized. Legally, this gives us certain rights, including the authority to remove animals from dangerous situations on this property. David watched in amazement as the veterinary team sedated the lion and began their examination. The professional efficiency was staggering. Within hours, they had established a complete medical profile, treated several infections, and prepared the animal for transport to Dr. Volkov's nearest facility, a world-class rehabilitation center just 2 hours away. But Dr. Volkov had another surprise in store. Mr. Martinez, she said as they watched the lion being carefully loaded into a specialized transport vehicle. Your documentation of this situation has been invaluable, but I have a proposition. How would you like to chronicle this lion's rehabilitation? Full access, complete creative control, with the understanding that your work will help raise awareness for similar cases worldwide. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was more than just a rescue. It was an opportunity to tell a story that could inspire global change. He accepted immediately. The journey to the rehabilitation center was surreal. David rode with Dr. Volkov, learning about her foundation's work and the broader crisis of illegal wildlife trafficking. She spoke with passion about the thousands of animals suffering in similar conditions worldwide, and her determination to combat what she called one of humanity's greatest shames. Every animal we save is a victory, she said, watching the transport vehicle ahead of them. But for everyone we rescue, dozens more remain trapped in situations like this. Your photographs, your story, they can help change that. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you want to see how this incredible rescue unfolds. Your engagement helps us bring more of these powerful stories to light. The rehabilitation center was unlike anything David had ever seen. Sprawling across hundreds of acres, it featured natural habitats that closely mimicked wild conditions, staffed by world-class veterinarians and animal behaviorists. The lion, whom the staff continued to call Simba, though Dr. Volkov expressed distaste for the name, was placed in a quarantine facility for initial treatment and observation. Over the following weeks, David witnessed a transformation that defied belief. The lion's physical recovery was remarkable. Proper nutrition, medical care, and exercise opportunities restored his strength and vitality. His mane grew thick and golden again, his muscles regained their definition, and the dull resignation in his eyes was replaced by alert intelligence. But it was the psychological rehabilitation that truly amazed David. Dr. Sarah Chen, the center's lead animal behaviorist, worked with Simba daily, using enrichment activities and gradual exposure to natural stimuli to awaken instincts that had been suppressed by years of captivity. He's remembering what it means to be a lion, Dr. Chen explained during one of David's interviews. The hunting instincts, the territorial awareness, the social cues, they're all still there, just buried under trauma. Our job is to help him find them again. David documented every phase of this process, from the lion's first tentative exploration of a larger enclosure to his growing confidence as his natural behaviors reasserted themselves. The transformation was so complete that after 3 months, Simba bore little resemblance to the broken animal David had first encountered. But Dr. Volkov had an even bigger surprise in store. "We're going to release him," she announced during a team meeting. "Not into the wild. He's been in captivity too long for that to be safe. But we've identified a perfect situation. There's a female lion at a partner reserve in Tanzania who lost her mate to poachers last year. She's been alone, struggling to maintain her territory. If Simba accepts her, and she accepts him, we can relocate them both to a protected area where they can live as naturally as possible." The logistics of this plan were staggering. It involved coordination with multiple governments, wildlife authorities, and conservation organizations. The female lion, named Nala by the reserve staff, had to be carefully evaluated to ensure compatibility. Transport arrangements had to be made, and perhaps most importantly, Simba had to demonstrate that he was ready for this next phase of his life. David was invited to document the entire process, from the initial introduction of the two lions via scent exchange to their eventual meeting in a neutral territory. The tension was palpable as the two magnificent animals approached each other for the first time. Simba moved with cautious confidence, his newly restored instincts guiding his behavior. Nala was initially wary, circling at a distance, but gradually allowed him closer. When they finally made physical contact, a gentle touch of noses that David captured in what would become one of his most famous photographs, there wasn't a dry eye among the observers. The bond between the two lions developed quickly. Within weeks, they were inseparable, hunting together, resting in companionable silence, and displaying all the behaviors of a mated pair. Dr. Volkov was triumphant. "This is why we do this work," she told David as they watched the lions interact. "I'm not just to save individual animals, but to restore what was broken, to give them the chance to live as they were meant to live." Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Stories like Simba's remind us of the incredible resilience of wildlife and the power of human compassion working together. The release process itself was gradual and carefully monitored. The lions were first moved to a pre-release facility in Tanzania, a large fenced area that approximated wild conditions but still allowed for observation and intervention if necessary. Both animals thrived in this environment, with Simba fully embracing his role as a protector and provider. David spent a month documenting this phase, capturing intimate moments between the pair and their gradual adaptation to their new home. The photographs told a story of redemption and hope that resonated far beyond the conservation community. But the most emotional moment came when Dr. Volkov made her final announcement. The lions would be released into a 10,000-acre protected reserve, where they would be monitored but allowed to live completely free. It was, she explained, the best possible outcome for animals with their history. The release day was carefully orchestrated. The transport crates were positioned at the edge of a vast savanna with hidden cameras set up to record the moment. David was given the honor of opening Simba's crate. The lion emerged slowly, every sense alert. He looked around at the endless grassland, the acacia trees, the distant mountains. For several minutes, he stood perfectly still, as if absorbing the magnitude of his freedom. Then Nala emerged from her crate, and together they walked into their new territory. David's cameras captured every step as the two lions disappeared into the tall grass, finally free to live as nature intended. It was, he later wrote, the most profound moment of his career. The story didn't end there. Dr. Volkov's foundation used David's photographs and documentation to launch a global campaign against illegal wildlife trafficking and inadequate animal care. The images of Simba's transformation became iconic, appearing in magazines, documentaries, and educational materials worldwide. More importantly, the campaign led to real change. Governments strengthened regulations. Law enforcement agencies increased their focus on wildlife crimes, and public awareness of the issue reached unprecedented levels. Dozens of similar rescues were conducted in the months following Simba's story, with many directly inspired by David's work. 6 months after the release, David returned to Tanzania for a follow-up visit. Using GPS tracking data provided by the reserve, he located the lions' territory. Through powerful telephoto lenses, he observed them in their natural element, healthy, confident, and completely at home in the wild. But the biggest surprise came when the tracking data revealed that Nala was pregnant. The continuation of their bloodline represented more than just successful reproduction. It was proof that their rehabilitation had been complete, that these two animals who had suffered so much were now contributing to the future of their species. If this story has touched your heart, please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Your support helps us continue sharing these incredible stories of hope and transformation. Dr. Volkov was emotional when she received the news. "This is what success looks like," she told David during a video call. "Not just saving animals, but giving them the opportunity to create the next generation. Simba's cubs will be truly wild lions, born free and knowing nothing of cages or captivity." David's documentation of Simba's journey became a book, a documentary film, and a traveling photography exhibition. But more than that, it became a symbol of hope for everyone working in wildlife conservation. It proved that even the most damaged animals could be restored, given proper care and dedication. The ripple effects of Simba's story continued to spread. Young people inspired by the tale pursued careers in conservation. Donors opened their wallets to support similar rescue efforts. Governments allocated more resources to wildlife protection, and slowly but surely, the world became a little bit safer for wild animals. Years later, David still visited the reserve annually. Simba and Nala's pride had grown to include 5 cubs, all thriving in their protected environment. The once broken lion had become a successful patriarch, his offspring carrying on his genetic legacy in complete freedom. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire story was how it began, with one person who couldn't walk away from suffering, even when he felt powerless to help. David's decision to document Simba's plight and seek assistance had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just one animal's life, but contributed to a global movement for animal welfare. "Sometimes, Dr. Volkov reflected during their last conversation, "the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to accept that suffering is inevitable." David didn't have the resources to save Simba alone, but he had something more important. He had the courage to try, and the persistence to keep trying until the right help arrived. The story of Simba's rescue and rehabilitation became legendary in conservation circles, but its real power lay in its message of hope. It demonstrated that even in a world where thousands of animals suffer in captivity, individual actions can create extraordinary change. It proved that when human compassion meets professional expertise and adequate resources, miraculous transformations are possible. As David watched Simba's cubs playing in the African sun, he reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. It had started with a chance discovery, a caged lion, and one person's refusal to walk away. It had led to a partnership with one of the world's most powerful conservationists, a successful rehabilitation against all odds, and ultimately to new life in the wild. The story of the man who saved the caged lion had become something much bigger. It had become proof that every animal deserves freedom, that every rescue matters, and that sometimes the most surprising outcomes emerge from the simplest acts of compassion. Before you go, please remember to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Stories like Simba's remind us that we all have the power to make a difference, one life at a time. Together, we can ensure that more animals get the second chance they deserve. The legacy of Simba's rescue lives on, inspiring new generations of conservationists and animal lovers. His story proves that what happens next doesn't always have to be tragic. Sometimes, with enough love, determination, and the right connections, it can be truly miraculous. In a world full of darkness, Simba's journey from a cramped cage to the African savanna stands as a beacon of hope, reminding us all that freedom is worth fighting for, and that every life, no matter how seemingly insignificant, has immeasurable value. This is the power of one person's decision to act, multiplied by the resources and expertise of those who dedicate their lives to protecting wildlife. This is what happens when compassion meets capability, when documentation meets determination, and when the right people come together at the right time to change a life forever.